There comes a moment in every human heart when you realize that clinging, chasing, and begging for someone's attention has only kept you in chains. And the instant you release that grip, the instant you stand tall and whisper to yourself, "I don't need this anymore," something extraordinary happens. The very person who thought they could run, avoid, and hide begins to feel the weight of your absence. Understand, this power does not exist in holding tighter. Power exists in letting go. When you no longer fight for their love, when you no longer pour your energy into proving your worth, you shift the entire dynamic. Suddenly, the one who thought they were safe in their distance begins to feel unsafe in their silence. Because your silence is not emptiness. Your silence is strength. The avoidant who once thrived on your pursuit now faces the mirror of truth. Their mask of cool indifference starts to crack. Why? Because it was never real. It was a shield, a performance, a fragile illusion built to protect them from the terror of intimacy. But when you stop caring, when you no longer bend yourself to fit into their walls, you leave them standing alone with nothing but their fear, and that fear is deafening. Loss has a way of awakening the soul. When you no longer show up to play the same game, they are forced to face themselves. For the first time, they must sit with the thought, what if I was wrong? What if I pushed away the very person who saw me, who valued me, who was willing to love me? And that question burns. That question lingers in the silence of midnight, in the loneliness of their own making. But here's the truth: your growth is not about their realization. Your freedom, your strength, your light is not dependent on whether they regret or not. It's about you stepping into a higher calling, because the moment you stop chasing is the moment you discover your own wings. You realize you were never meant to shrink to earn love. You were meant to expand, to radiate, to attract love by being the fullest version of yourself. So when you let go, you don't just change the relationship, you change yourself. And in that transformation lies the ultimate power. You become untouchable. You rise above the fear of rejection. You awaken to the truth that you are whole, complete, and enough. And that, more than anything else, is what they feel when you don't care anymore. They feel the loss of your light. They feel the absence of your energy. And while that may shatter them, it liberates you, because your destiny is not to be chained to someone's avoidance. Your destiny is to walk boldly into love, purpose, and divine freedom. And when you choose that, everything changes. When you've been entangled with someone who pulls away, who shuts down, who makes you feel like you're constantly chasing their love, it's easy to believe that your power lies in getting them to come closer. You convince yourself that if you just say the right thing, show the right side of yourself, or prove how much you care, you'll finally break through their walls. But what you don't realize in that moment is that the true power doesn't come from holding on. It comes from letting go. It comes from standing tall in your own value and saying, I will not lose myself trying to hold someone who doesn't want to be held. When you let go, something profound happens. The energy shifts. You've been pouring all of your light into their darkness, trying to warm up a heart that resists the fire. You've been giving away your power, handing them control over your joy, your peace, your sense of worth. But the moment you step back, the moment you reclaim your energy and redirect it toward yourself, the balance changes. They feel it. Even if they don't admit it, even if they try to act like nothing's different, they sense the shift. They no longer feel your pull. And for someone who has built their sense of safety around controlling the distance, that loss of pull is unsettling. It's not anger that unnerves them. It's not your words, your tears, or your confrontation. It's your indifference. It's when you stop trying. It's when you no longer chase, because the avoidant has built an entire identity around the idea that they are the one who decides when to give and when to take away. They've convinced themselves they're in control. But when you let go, when you finally stop caring about whether they lean in or walk out, you shatter that illusion. You take back the control that was never theirs to begin with. Think about it. For so long, you've been running a race they never even entered. You've been sprinting after a finish line that keeps moving farther away. And all the while, they've been watching, knowing that as long as you keep running, they don't have to move. But the moment you stop, the moment you drop out of the race, they're left standing still with nowhere to hide. And that is when reality begins to set in. Power is not about force. Power is about choice. When you choose to let go, you're making the boldest statement you could ever make. I am no longer available to be treated as an option. I am no longer waiting for scraps of love. I am no longer bending myself into shapes to fit into someone's fear. That choice doesn't just change the relationship. It changes you. It frees you. It reminds you that your worth is not determined by how hard you fight to be loved, but by how deeply you choose to love yourself. And here's the paradox: when you no longer chase, when you no longer try to convince or control, that's when the avoidant feels the shift in their bones. That's when the questions start to haunt them. Why aren't they calling me anymore? Why aren't they waiting for me? Why do I feel this emptiness where their energy used to be? It's in that silence, in that letting go, that the power returns to you. Because the truth is, you were never powerless. You were never at their mercy. You simply forgot where your strength lived. And it lives in the moment you decide to release what no longer serves you. It lives in the freedom of saying, I will not give my energy to someone who doesn't value it. It lives in your ability to walk away without fear, knowing that your worth does not diminish because someone else couldn't recognize it. That is the power shift. That is the moment everything changes. Not when they come running back, not when they realize what they've lost, but when you realize who you are. There is a language more powerful than any words you could ever speak, and that language is silence. For someone who is avoidant, silence is both their weapon and their shield. They use it to retreat, to create distance, to protect themselves from intimacy they feel unprepared to handle. They rely on it as a way to control the pace of connection, to keep the upper hand, to remind you that they decide how close or how far things go. But what happens when you no longer react to that silence, when you no longer try to fill the space with your pleading, your reassurance, your effort? What happens when you mirror it with your own stillness? That's when silence transforms from their weapon into their teacher, when you stop speaking into the void, when you stop chasing the echo of someone who doesn't want to be reached. Your absence becomes louder than any words you could have spoken. It unsettles them in ways they never expected. Because they were prepared for your fight. They were prepared for your questions. They were prepared for your attempts to break through their walls. What they were not prepared for was your stillness. They were not prepared for your ability to stop trying. In that moment, silence stops being their comfort and starts being their mirror. It reflects back to them the truth they've been running from, that their distance cost them something real. You see, silence has weight. It has presence. It fills the space between two people with meaning. When you fall silent, it forces the avoidant to confront a reality they've long tried to avoid, that relationships require effort from both sides, that connection cannot survive on one person's terms forever. Your silence is not an act of punishment, it is an act of self-respect. It says, without words, I will not beg for what should be freely given. I will not fight to be seen by someone who chooses to look away. The irony is that silence has a way of piercing deeper than confrontation ever could. Words can be argued with, they can be dismissed, deflected, or twisted. But silence leaves no room for debate. It leaves them alone with their thoughts, their fears, their doubts. In the quiet, they begin to feel the absence of your energy, your laughter, your attention. And for someone who thought they could thrive in distance, that absence becomes unbearable. They thought they wanted space, but when the space grows too wide, they realize how much life was carried in your presence. There is a profound difference between silence born from weakness and silence born from strength. Weak silence is avoidance. Strong silence is sovereignty. When you fall quiet from strength, it means you are no longer available for one-sided effort. It means you are at peace with yourself, not waiting by the phone, not pacing the floor, not crafting messages in your head that will never be sent. It means you have chosen yourself, and in choosing yourself, you've communicated a message louder than any argument ever could. I do not need to chase you to prove my worth. And make no mistake, they feel it. They may not admit it out loud, but they sense when the energy has shifted. The silence that once gave them control now leaves them unsteady. It forces them to wonder, why aren't they trying anymore? Why aren't they reaching out? Why do I feel this emptiness where their effort used to be? Those questions echo louder in their mind than any confrontation you could ever deliver. The beauty of silence is that it teaches both sides. It teaches them the cost of their avoidance, and it teaches you the depth of your strength. It shows you that you don't need to scream to be heard, that you don't need to beg to be valued, that sometimes the most powerful statement is made not in words, but in absence. And in that absence, you discover your own presence. You discover that your worth does not depend on someone else's ability to recognize it, but on your ability to honor it yourself. This is why silence is not emptiness. Silence is power. It is the voice of your soul saying, I choose peace over chaos. I choose dignity over desperation. I choose myself over chasing someone who hides. And that choice, that strength, speaks volumes they cannot ignore. Every avoidant wears a mask. On the surface, it looks like composure, indifference, control. They convince you, and sometimes even themselves, that they don't need much, that emotions roll off their back, that closeness doesn't matter. They present themselves as untouchable, immune to the kind of vulnerability that makes others stumble. But what you must understand is that this mask is not strength, it is armor. And armor only has meaning when there's something fragile underneath. The moment you stop caring, the moment you withdraw your investment in their facade, the cracks in that mask begin to show. For a long time, their detachment may have felt impenetrable. They seemed unbothered by your tears, your longing, your attempts to reach them. They could pull away with what looked like ease. But that ease was never real. It was a performance designed to keep you dancing, to keep you questioning, to keep you pouring your energy into proving your worth. As long as you cared, as long as you chased, their mask worked. But when you no longer respond, when your energy is no longer available, their performance starts to collapse. Because a mask only holds power if there is an audience watching. The absence of your attention exposes what was always there: vulnerability, fear, longing, and regret. They begin to feel what they've tried so hard to bury. They begin to taste the very emotions they thought they had numbed away. And it unsettles them. It unnerves them. Because the mask they've relied on for safety can't protect them from the silence of someone who has stopped caring. When you let go, when you release the chase, they are left with no one to distract them from their inner world. The armor doesn't feel like safety anymore. It feels like isolation. Imagine a stage performer who wears a costume every night, convincing the crowd of their character strength. The lights are bright, the applause is loud, and for a moment, the performance feels real. But if the crowd leaves, if the theater goes silent, the costume suddenly feels heavy. It doesn't empower them anymore. It exposes their loneliness. That is the experience of an avoidant when you stop caring. Their mask, once their shield, becomes their burden. And here's the truth most people miss: avoidance is not born from strength. It's born from fear, fear of rejection, fear of inadequacy, fear of being truly seen. The cool detachment is not confidence. It's self-protection. When you cared, they could hide behind it. But when you don't, they are left alone with the very fears they've been running from. They begin to feel the weight of questions they've tried to silence. What if I'm unlovable? What if I've pushed away the only person who saw me? What if I'm truly alone? These questions are not cracks in the mask. They are fractures that run deep into the foundation of their being. Your indifference doesn't just expose their mask. It forces them to reckon with the cost of wearing it for so long. For the first time, they feel the absence of the love, the attention, the warmth they once dismissed. They realize that the armor that kept them safe also kept them separate, and now it may have cost them something they can't get back. That realization cuts deeper than any confrontation could. Because when you cared, they could tell themselves they still had time. When you stop, they are forced to see that time has run out. The mask begins to crumble, not because you fought harder, but because you stopped fighting, not because you shouted louder, but because you fell silent. That silence is what reveals the truth. And in that truth, they are no longer the one in control. They are no longer the distant, untouchable figure. They are human, vulnerable, and whether they admit it or not, they feel the sting of your absence in a way they cannot hide. That is the paradox of avoidance. It seems powerful until it meets indifference. It seems like armor until it's no longer needed. And in the end, it exposes what was always there: a fragile heart, terrified of love, finally realizing what it has lost. Loss is one of the greatest awakeners of the human spirit. We rarely understand the value of something while it is within our grasp. We take it for granted, assuming it will always be there, assuming it will always bend, always wait, always forgive. The avoidant lives in that illusion more than most. They believe that distance keeps them safe, that pushing love away will somehow protect them from being hurt. But when you stop caring, when you no longer play your part in the cycle of pursuit and withdrawal, they are faced with the one reality they've worked so hard to avoid: the reality of loss. And loss has a way of making even the strongest walls feel paper thin. In the beginning, they may pretend nothing has changed. They may act as if your absence doesn't touch them, as if their world is untouched by your silence. But the truth has a way of seeping in. The routines you once filled with your energy now feel empty. The messages that used to come, the comfort of knowing you were always there, has vanished. And in that void, the avoidant meets a kind of reflection they can't escape. They start to recognize what it means when you no longer care. They are no longer chosen, no longer prioritized, no longer seen. For someone who has built their identity on controlling closeness, that loss is devastating. Loss strips away illusions. It forces the avoidant to confront questions they've buried beneath their armor. What did I do? Why did I push away the one person who stood by me? Was I so afraid of being hurt that I created the very pain I feared most? These questions are not fleeting thoughts. They echo. They linger in the quiet moments of their day. They show up in the late night hours when distractions fade and honesty takes hold. And that is when the truth hits. They didn't just lose your attention, they lost the safety of your presence, the gift of your belief in them, the love that was freely offered. The irony is that the avoidant often fears being forgotten more than they fear closeness itself. On the surface, they act indifferent, but underneath, their deepest terror is being insignificant. When you stop caring, when you no longer orbit around them, that terror becomes real. They realize that in trying to protect themselves from pain, they created a greater pain, the pain of irrelevance, the pain of being left behind. And it's in this moment a recognition that their walls no longer feel like safety, they feel like a prison. But understand this: their reflection is not about you proving a point. It's not about punishing them or waiting for them to regret. It's about the natural law of life. When you neglect something of value, you lose it. And when it's gone, you're forced to reckon with what you dismissed. That reckoning is where growth is born. Whether they choose to change or not, whether they act on that realization or not, the truth remains. Loss has shown them what avoidance cost. For you, this is a sacred reminder that your worth was never diminished by their inability to value it. Their regret, their reflection, is not your victory. Your victory is that you chose yourself before the loss destroyed you. Their true reaction to your indifference is not power over you. It's the awakening of their own soul to the consequences of their choices. And that awakening, though painful, is necessary. So the avoidant sits with the silence, with the emptiness, with the echo of what once was. And as the weight of loss presses down, they begin to see that the distance they clung to so tightly was not protection. It was the very thing that cost them what mattered most. That realization is the mirror they cannot escape. And it is the mirror that finally forces them to see themselves without disguise. There is a moment after you let go when your life begins to breathe again. You start to laugh a little louder, dream a little bigger, and carry yourself with a confidence that doesn't depend on anyone else's validation. And this transformation does not go unnoticed. The avoidant, who once relied on your pursuit to fuel the dynamic, begins to see something they never expected: your freedom, your joy, your unshakable sense of worth. And in that freedom, they are confronted with a reflection that unsettles them to their core. Because freedom is magnetic. When you rise above the pattern of chasing and waiting, you send a silent but undeniable message. I am no longer bound by this dance. I am no longer defined by your distance. I am whole within myself. That message strikes at the very heart of the avoidant's illusion of control. They once believed that you would always be there, orbiting around them, making up for the love they withheld. But when you reclaim yourself, when you begin to shine brighter without their approval, they see what they pushed away, and it ignites a conflict inside of them they cannot ignore. What unsettles them most is not anger or blame. It is the radiance of your independence. They see you thriving, and deep inside, they are forced to ask if they are this alive without me. What does that say about me? What does that say about what I gave or failed to give? The very freedom that elevates you becomes the mirror that exposes their choices. And in that mirror, regret is born. This regret is not just about losing you as a partner. It's about losing the reflection of themselves they once had in your eyes. You saw them. You believed in them. You poured love into places they couldn't reach themselves. And now, seeing you vibrant without them, they realize what they dismissed. They see that the love they treated lightly was not weakness, but strength. They see that the presence they once took for granted was a gift, not a guarantee. And as you soar, they feel the weight of the wings they never allowed themselves to spread. Your freedom highlights their captivity. While you rise into greater joy, they remain stuck in the same patterns of avoidance, the same fears, the same walls. And the contrast is sharp. It shows them what they could have had, what they could have become, if only they had been willing to step closer instead of pulling away. This contrast does not just sting, it awakens. It forces them to see that what they avoided was not pain, but the very opportunity for growth and connection. But here is where the beauty lies. Your freedom is not about them. It's not about making them regret or teaching them a lesson. It's about stepping fully into your own power, your own joy, your own destiny. It's about realizing that love does not require shrinking yourself, waiting endlessly, or proving your worth to someone who refuses to see it. It's about honoring the truth that your light shines brightest when you stop dimming it for someone else's comfort. And that is the paradox. The moment you stop centering them, the moment you live fully for yourself, is the very moment they feel your absence most deeply. They don't just see what they lost. They see what they never fully receive. They see the depth of love, the vibrancy of spirit, the resilience of soul that was always there, waiting to be met. And now it shines without them. Your freedom becomes the ultimate mirror. It reflects back to them the cost of avoidance, the cost of distance, the cost of fear. And though it may stir regret, it should stir no doubt in you, because their reaction, whether regret, sorrow, or longing, is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to live fully, to embrace the freedom you have found, and to continue to rise. In doing so, you not only reclaim your life, you embody the truth that real power has always belonged to you. There comes a turning point where you realize that all the energy you spent trying to be seen, understood, and valued by someone who kept pulling away has only drained you of your essence. You wake up one day and feel the weight lift because you've finally chosen to release it. That release is not weakness. It is the highest form of strength. When you let go, when you no longer tether your worth to how someone else responds, you step into a power that can't be taken from you. And whether the avoidant recognizes it or not, their true reaction matters less than the transformation you experience within yourself. For so long, your focus was on them, their moods, their distance, their moments of closeness, followed by retreat. You measured your own worth through their lens, constantly adjusting, constantly giving, hoping they would finally meet you in the middle. But every time you chased, you handed over pieces of yourself. Letting go is the moment you call your spirit back. It's the moment you decide, I will no longer abandon myself to be chosen by someone else. That is liberation, and it is the foundation of unshakable self-worth. What's profound is how your energy changes when you reclaim it. You no longer walk with heaviness, constantly bracing for rejection or withdrawal. Instead, you walk with clarity, with lightness, with a presence that commands respect. That energy is unmistakable. People feel it. You feel it. It is the energy of someone who has chosen themselves, someone who is no longer negotiating their value. And when the avoidant senses that, even from afar, it unsettles them deeply, because the control they once felt is gone. The chase is over. The game no longer exists. But here's the truth: their reaction is no longer your concern. You don't let go to provoke regret, to inspire change, or to draw them back in. You let go because your soul demands freedom. You let go because your life has a higher calling than waiting in the shadows of someone's fear. You let go because you finally understand that love is not meant to be earned through suffering. It is meant to be shared in freedom. And in that letting go, you unlock a different kind of power, the kind that no one can take from you. It's the power of knowing that your destiny is not tied to one person's willingness to love you. It's the power of realizing that your worth is infinite, that your love is sacred, that your presence is a gift. When you embody this truth, your relationships change, your future changes, your entire life begins to expand in ways you couldn't see while you were locked in the cycle of pursuit. The avoidant may feel your absence as a loss. They may finally confront the cost of their avoidance. They may even regret long or wonder what could have been. But none of that defines your story, because the greatest victory is not in how they react, but in how you rise. You are no longer bound by their walls, no longer silenced by their distance, no longer dimmed by their inability to see. You are free. And in that freedom, you discover that everything you were chasing in them, the love, the recognition, the safety, has always been within you. Letting go is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of the chapter where you step fully into your power. It is where you learn to love yourself without condition, where you discover joy that doesn't depend on anyone else, where you live with a fullness that cannot be shaken. Their true reaction, whatever it may be, is simply a byproduct of the shift. But the essence, the miracle, is this: you are no longer waiting for someone else to set you free. You have set yourself free, and that freedom is everything. And so, my friends, remember this: the greatest turning point in your life is not when someone finally sees you, but when you finally see yourself. It's not when an avoidant comes running back in regret, but when you rise so high in your own strength that you no longer wait for them to return. Every step of letting go has led you to this moment, the moment you reclaim your worth, your joy, your divine freedom. That is the victory, that is the power, and that is the life you were created to live. Thank you for sharing your energy, your hearts, and your presence with me today. May you walk forward with unshakable faith, unstoppable courage, and a love for yourself that no one can take away.